Okay, so if we can start with a very simple one, how did you get involved in the IT industry? Was it something you've always wanted to do, or was you sort of late comer to it? Yeah, where did it all start?
Well, I kind of grew up in an era where, the computers weren't around. And so that they first made their appearance around in the 1980s in our household, at least. And I think my father bought one of the very first IBM personal computers, and he was using it in his business. And by that time, I was an adult with small children. So I didn't have the idea that I would always be in IT. I was way more oriented towards the arts, and I was a musician. I had a knack for designing ball gowns for Barbie dolls. So I loved everything relating to visual arts and music arts. And so that's really kind of where my natural tendencies were. And I didn't learn to program, and I didn't actually have my own computer until I had toddlers. So yeah,
Okay.
and it was a total accident that I got into IT.
Okay, so how did that accident come about then?
So as I said, I had small children, and I realized, I had one of those life moments where I realized I was going to need to make sure that I had a career that was going to be, have a decent paycheck. I had done my studies as an undergraduate in biochemistry and chemistry. And so life sciences for me were kind of the norm, and physical sciences. But when I found that I needed to go back to work, getting a job in those arenas under my circumstances wasn't possible. So when my brother came over and he gave me a TRS-80 Model 1, he laid it out across the kitchen table. He said, "Sister, you need to learn to code." And I had no idea what was involved with that, but he helped me. He was actually a hacker, and in the most literal sense of the term. And he helped me learn how to do, the basic languages. And I found out I was really good at it. So when grad school, the local university opened up a grad school in computer science, and they were advertising for students. And I thought, maybe I could try that. And to my surprise, I got in, and with grants and scholarships and a lot of help, I made it through in 2 years with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And then I got hired immediately, because the areas that I did my studies in were in encryption, in kind of encryption related areas, and cybersecurity wasn't a thing anybody was really talking about at that time. But I got hired into doing the security for government classified projects for the Boeing company, and I stayed in it ever since.
Okay, and from your first sort of foray into the IT world to where you've ended up at VMware today, can you give us some sort of highlights of how many steps along the way there've been?
Oh goodness, people ask me that a lot. Like I talk to young people who say, and what was the plan and how did the steps go? And to be honest, there wasn't a roadmap, and there wasn't a career path, and there wasn't something where I said, this is where I want to be. In fact, I tried that once. And for me, what it was going through open doors. So when someone basically opened up an opportunity and said, we would like you to do XYZ. And I had no idea how to do it. I didn't know anybody who'd ever done it. I hadn't seen anybody do it, but they were offering me that opportunity to give it a try. I eventually always said yes. And I think that's the way the path worked. It was, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm learning. And somebody comes over here and says, we think it would be great for you to go do this thing. And I just did that. And just, it turned out to be a series of opportunities that gave me a background that was unique in the industry. So I was one of the few people who was doing cybersecurity research and engineering in the 1990s that wasn't already tied to, like a 3-letter agency or some kind of a university program. Out in the public sector, there was a limited number of us. And so that gave me the opportunity to sort of be on the bleeding edge of some things, and effectively made me a de facto expert pretty early in my career.
Okay, and just to bring us up to date, so what is it, your current role at VMware? Can you just give us a bit of an idea of what it is you do there at the moment?
Sure. I'm a cybersecurity strategist, senior cybersecurity strategist. That means that I look at the horizon. I look at where things are going with cloud security and cloud computing. I write articles about that. I write articles about the industry. I talk with customers and talk with them about their what's top of mind for them. And we work on conversations around roadmaps and strategies that will help them get their business goals done using our products.
Okay, and you referenced the fact that when you started out, or part of the reason you started out was because you had young children and trying to find a career around those. So you clearly did have some challenges, and I'm just interested, was that the only sort of obstacle you had to overcome? With other things? And bear in mind, the series I'm doing is about women in IT. Do you think any of them, clearly the children one was, but were there any other things that you sort of encountered, you think, because you were a female in what I presume was a male-dominated world, you found when you went into IT?
That's a great question. I mean, everything, it's how we look at it, right? So I am one of those optimists in general that says, if this is an opportunity that I'm supposed to be doing, there's a way for this to happen. And obstacles to me are something that I go over, around, under, or through, or blow them up. So that's just how that's my nature. Like, I have my underlying personality. So I never really looked at anything as, gosh, this is a tremendous obstacle, or I looked at everything as like, oh, okay, that's facts on the ground. Let's go figure out how to make it work. And I think when you have your sights, in general, when people have their sights not focused on things that as obstacles, but focused on opportunities and the belief that there's a solution for that, then that's something that they're going to find. So yeah, there were, I suppose in hindsight, it's easier for me to look at now and say, gosh, how did we do that? Because there were certain, I think if I had the nature to look at something to say, gosh, that shouldn't have happened that way, and let that undermine my determination, then I think that would have been, some things would have been showstoppers. So, not being taken seriously. I used to hear many years ago, the comment all the time is like, you're too pretty to be smart. And I was just like, huh? So that wasn't something that I really let get that, that bee didn't get under my helmet. There were maybe other things that were more self-generated. My biggest obstacle has been my own self-doubt sometimes. And if I screw something up and make a mistake, of course, nobody likes to do that. And for a long time, I would look at that and say, how could you have let that happen? As opposed to saying, everybody makes mistakes. What are you going to learn from this one, and move on? And it took me a few years really in the industry to sort of get to the point where I didn't have that fear of failure. That was probably my biggest obstacle, fear of failure, because it just lets you have some self-talk that's not very helpful.
And in terms of the folks you encountered, I mean, did you generally find good mentors help along the way? I mean, it sounds like you said you ended up by being a sort of expert. So there weren't very many of you, and I suspect there were even less of you that were women with your expertise. So that was a major advantage. But along the way, did you get support and help from most people you encountered, or were the odd sort of knockback, sort of like, what are you doing here, or was it mainly an encouraging atmosphere you found?
I would say uniform. Well, no, there were absolutely individuals who were extraordinarily difficult in my career. But along the lines of people who were allies, I was so incredibly fortunate to have a set of key, very influential allies who believed in me. And they were the ones who made me work the hardest. Like I think of my boss at AT&T Wireless, and he essentially put a job in front of me that nobody had done before, and I had no idea how we were going to do it. And the merger between Singular and AT&T Wireless depended upon me being successful in this role. And I remember him asking me, like, how are you going to make this happen? And I was like, I don't know. But I said, I promise you I will. And you're just going to have to trust me. And that was a big, big moment. Having mentors who weren't essentially saying, here's how you do it, Karen. What they were saying to me was, I believe in you and I depend on you to figure out how to get this done. And that is a gigantic vote of confidence that, if someone is willing to stake that on me, I have a saying, that success is making the people who believed in you look brilliant. And that's, that motivated me when they gave me something very difficult to do and said, I believe you can do this. And it's like, okay, I'm going to make you shine. So I did have those allies along the way. Yeah.
And in terms of the sort of what you've observed as you've gone through your career, do you think that the sort of workplace, and from a sort of diversity point of view, whether that's women or other groups, is that, have you noticed that improved massively, or has it been a slow change and frustrating, or do you think, as I say, the industry's done fairly well in terms of coming up to speed with embracing women in the workplace much more than perhaps historically?
Well, when I started really talking a lot about women in the workplace, women in the tech workplace in particular, the thing that triggered that for me was the statistic that when I was getting my master's degree in computer science, women were 34% of the computing workforce. That number probably dropped to about 11%, and it's bounced up a little. So something tells me that something is broken. I'm not exactly sure that I know all of it, but the research that I read says we have a she problem and a we problem. And some of it is our own internal blueprint that we've absorbed from the bro culture in Silicon Valley. And it makes us believe things about ourselves that are not helpful, and it gets in women's way. And my belief is some of those things, for example, include the idea that it's better to not rock the boat. It's better to be under the radar, keep your head down, get your job done, do it better than anybody else, and be recognized, which doesn't happen. It's that we have to have something 80 to 100% in order to say yes. We have to have 80 to 100% of the skills to take on a new job, as opposed to saying, I'm going to figure it out as I go. Those are problems we've internalized for some reason as women, and maybe even with the broader community of underrepresented groups. So there's that problem. The other one is we still have some systemic issues in place. And a lot of this, if you look at Emily, I love Emily Chang's book about breaking up the boys club of Silicon Valley, because she kind of goes back and does a retrospective that shows us how some of these things develop. Nobody sets out to be an obstacle for other people intentionally. That's my belief anyway. We have learned certain behaviors and we've adopted certain values out of the internet economy that started in the 1960s. And one of those things, as an example, was high pay equals white male. Another, another idea that there's a way for qualifying people who are part of your circle, and you tend to hire them from the circles that you already know. You don't go fishing in ponds you've never fished in before, for example. And so there's a set of mechanisms in place. And there's also a set of unconscious biases that are still in place. One of the statistics that really shocked me was showing that when it comes time to do the performance review system that most of the companies I've ever been in have had in place, it's women will see about 80% of the performance reviews written for women will have non-actionable negative language about her personality, compared to 3% for men. So it shows that we still have a long ways to go, that some of these things are systemic barriers that are in place that hold people back. We have a challenge for women in the tech sector for getting their first promotion into leadership roles, management roles. I mean, I think you can be a leader from wherever you are, but to be recognized with the accountability and authority and the resources as a leader, that's hard to get that first promotion. And then women tend to plateau out around the senior director level, and they don't really make it into the top ranks. And so you see a pipeline and you see women coming in, but what you don't see is that same kind of the reflection of an increase of women in the industry showing up at the top. And so just anytime you go look at a new tech company, first thing I always do is go to the website and see what roles do women occupy at the top level, who show up in the executive, the executive photos on the website. Typically, you will see women in marketing, in HR, and finance and legal. So they're all support roles. You won't typically see women heading the engineering department. And those line roles are really important for us to see the diversity there. We have a long ways to go. I feel like with programs like, in the United States, we have EEO, we have family medical leave. In Europe, we've had practices that are supportive of women with children and families. And I think that I didn't have that when I was starting my career, and that was rough. So I think those things do make a big difference, but we still have a long way to go.
Okay, and I know it is a complex topic, but do you have any thoughts as to how to make some more progress? Because as you say, we're evolving, and I think we're heading in the right direction, but seems fairly slow progress. I mean, do you think it's possible to have a sort of revolution and get there quickly, or do we have to accept that it will be a slower process? But whichever way, what sort of things do you think can be implemented to speed up the very necessary process to get more equality?
Yeah, you're right. It is a complex system, and like I said, I like to take complex things and try to make them simpler and break them into piece parts that I can do something with. So first of all, and this is where I focus my energy, is working with women to make sure that the she problem is addressed as much as possible. And I think there's a tremendous amount of work being done there. Lots of great organizations trying to help women. It's in women's empowerment, but they come in all different forms and shapes, and women can choose from a range of things that help them overcome those obstacles. I think that's huge. I think we can do more to look at the way we attract, recruit, onboard, develop, and maintain and retain our people. Those processes all need to be looked at. And, you know, I think organizations feel constrained because you can't, diversity by the numbers doesn't work. We know that. What we need to do is create workplaces that are inclusive. And that is a fundamental change in the way human beings interact with each other. And the systems and the workplace culture that creates that collaboration, that environment of working together. I would say I was very fortunate, by the way, to work at the Boeing company in my early career, because I believe that culture, as an engineering company that built massive airplanes, that in the days of building the 777 aircraft, that is exactly the culture that they set out to attain. And what I was very fortunate to be a part of and to witness there was how much everyone had the opportunity to make their best contribution, unencumbered by bureaucratic productivity killers. And the first airplane that rolled off the line, the first 777 that rolled off the line that went to United Airlines, was named People Working Together. When you create an environment where everyone brings their very best self to work, that they bring together their gifts and talent as they are and can contribute with that in a work environment, you're going to get the very best product you can. That's my belief. And I think we have a corporate culture that tends to, I think of it as a blender. Like, we bring all of these people in with all of these incredible gifts and skills and differences, and we don't magnify the difference and take advantage of the power of difference. We have a program at VMware we call Power of Difference, which I love, right? But most companies take all of that different variety, throw them all in a corporate blender to make them all the same. They all come out beige, like all that rainbow, just blended to beige. And because it's like safe and convenient. If everybody speaks the same, if everybody thinks the same, it does tend to make meetings go easier, communication go easier, but you get a subpar product every time because you've lost the diversity of thought and innovation that's necessary. So, yeah.
Okay, so just a couple of things occur to me there. So the culture sounds incredibly important, and no matter how many people within an organization want to make a change, it often requires someone at the very top to, at the very least, allow that to happen, if not, actively encourage it. And just another thing strikes me, that the younger generation seem to be more attuned, whether it's sustainability or diversity, they seem to be more open and understanding, whereas, the older generations perhaps, less willing to change and embracing. So are you say, first up, so somebody needs to run the whole culture thing, and it normally has to happen at the top, and second, are you optimistic that maybe as the younger generations rise up through the workplace or hit the workplace, this will become less of an issue because they are more used to dealing with diversity and accepting what it requires, as opposed to, I've been doing this for 40 years, why the hell should I change kind of attitude?
Right. I love that question, and I've asked it before because there is a generational difference, right? I come from a generation of suck it up, buttercup. Like, you have to do what it takes to make it work. And that came at some cost. And I talk about this publicly, that came at some cost to me. So one of the things I find so incredibly refreshing of millennial and Gen Z in particular, is that they're not willing to give quarter to that kind of behavior that says, I need you to do something my way, right? They resist that. And I think it will come to some extent, it will make it harder for them. It's always easier to kind of be compliant and get on board and kind of do things the way your boss wants. But I also think they're the ones who are going to be able to stand up and say, we have to make a different kind of work culture that does magnify the power of difference and get the best we can out of that. So I think there's hope with that. I do think that's going to be tough on them, and it makes me wonder in the tech sector if they're going to have the staying power to make the difference happen, or whether they're going to say, shove this, I'm going to go find something else to do. When I talk to groups of women, particularly more senior women, one of the things and many of them, 50% of women leave the tech sector by the time they've been in it for 12 years. And they don't just leave it, like get another job within the tech sector, they leave it entirely. And so what I'm trying to say is, look, we are the shoulders for the next generations of women in this industry. We're the shoulders for them to stand on. It won't work if we leave. So we have to figure out, what is it going to take for us to have the resilience and the persistence to stay in the industry, have a voice in the industry, make change happen, and do that without telling the generations, without telling the generations coming after us, you have to be like me. Because there's a benefit in not being like me. Do you see what I'm saying? They can adopt it if that fits them. But for many people, my style of leadership, my style of management, my style of living my life is not going to be something that they're going to choose to follow. So we need to make room for that difference, because I think it's only by making room for it that we're going to see the change happen. And I'm mindful of Melissa French Gates, who I think she said it would take us, at the current pace, it would take us 270 years to see parity in tech. That's very discouraging. I don't know how many billions of dollars it will take to try to make change happen, because we're not changing the technology, we have to change people. We have to recognize people's life experience, their values, their beliefs, and work within that framework and make change happen there. And that is not simple, like flipping a switch.
I guess I guess being slightly optimistic, I mentioned reference sustainability. I mean, I've come from the generation where the environment was, no one quite believed, everything, everyone's, all the doomsters, and yet, I don't know, a generation or two, everyone, certainly the youngsters are now, it's front and center. So there's a chance that similarly is there that you think that the sort of the women equality issue might well gain that kind of momentum, and therefore change will happen faster than, I know the 270 years is hopefully a little bit of an exaggeration, but do you think there is that opportunity, if everyone starts talking, that things will accelerate at a reasonable rate rather than just, drip, as you say, over the next sort of 50, 100 years or whatever?
My crystal ball on that, I don't know. I don't know the answer. And I guess, let's just say we don't know the answer. We're going to do our best anyway. We're going to do everything we can do to make it happen. It might not happen as fast as we want. The important thing is that it will happen eventually, and that we don't lose heart and stop trying. And if change doesn't happen, I mean, we're not facing a cliff like, global warming. We're not climate change. We're not facing, like a tipping point where there's a point of no return. I think that creates a sense of urgency that helps this get moved forward. I think in the area of gender dynamics, of the power of difference, of all of those things, what makes change happen is when organizations who take the risk and step forward and do the thing and are very successful in ways that they can share with other companies that actually impacts the bottom line, then you will see the change accelerate. The change isn't going to, it's been the right thing to do forever, and that has not made it happen. So I do think we have to have more evidence that this is good, not just good humanity, but good business. And there is growing evidence for that. I think that evidence is growing, and I'm encouraged by programs like the Inner MBA program that was started by Sounds True, Wisdom 2.0, LinkedIn, and the New York University. And that is what I would say is a conscious MBA for conscious business. And they're making traction. So programs like that, I think, will make a difference.
Yeah, I have to say, I have seen some surveys suggesting that the companies who embrace diversity, I mean, clearly it makes sense. If you're a company and you want to sell to both men and women, it would, it's logical that you have men and women in your organization helping you, make business decisions as to, what products you're going to make, how you're going to sell them, and stuff like that. So it seems to make total sense. And I say I've seen some surveys that actually seem to back that up. In terms of what can be done, to speed up that process, do we need more, women role models at the high level? I mean, a couple of people I've talked to, it's no secret, but you talk about the IT industry, or you see it on the television, in the media, it's inevitably, sort of Elon Musk, Bill Gates. You very rarely see a woman's, CIO, whatever, in an IT company being featured. I know there are some out there, but they don't, for whatever reason, they don't seem to get the equal level of publicity. So what sort of things do you think might, help the process, become more normal, better, faster, if that makes sense?
Well, in publicly traded companies, we have governance and oversight at the level of board of directors. And I think we will start to see changes in companies when boards, the dynamics and the makeup of boards is different. And there is a push, to get more women on boards. And that, it's still slow. But I think that's one area that will make a difference. I think we need to make sure we raise up a generation of women who, there's a saying which I've never really totally understood, is that you can't be what you can't see. And I reject that wholeheartedly, because the truth of it is, in the technology sector, just from a technology standpoint, the jobs that are going to be in existence in 5 years don't exist yet. So by definition, we're going to be what we can't see today. But the other piece of that is, yes, there are very few women. I think of, in Silicon Valley, a couple who led companies like eBay and HP, who made it to the top, but are no longer. They're behind the scenes, I guess. They're working more behind the scenes than out in front as a leader. So I might be losing the track of your question here, but I think we have to set the tone at the very top of the organization. And while that doesn't mean we're going to get a bunch of instant women at the CEO level, I think we will see the makeup of boards change. And boards care about company productivity. They care about company, bottom line, all of those dynamics. And I think maybe that's where we'll start to see the voice make the difference, for a path for more women to make it to line roles and key leadership roles in Silicon Valley and in the tech sector around the world.
And just maybe finally, do you also think, I mean, already the industry is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, short of personnel to fill roles. And as you pointed out just there, there's going to be a whole load of new jobs that nobody actually knows, what they are until the technology comes on and stuff. Do you think, if nothing else, I mean, being completely, sort of pessimistic, if there's no other reason why this equality should come about, it will be the fact that there are so many jobs to fill that companies will welcome, people from wherever, because they need jobs filled. Obviously, they want them with the right skills, but they will be less, prone to saying, "Oh, well, we need, a male 40 with 20 years experience to fill this role." It'll be like, we've got these roles to fill. Can we identify candidates that look like they've got the raw quality, and we can train them up or whatever? Do you think that's possibly how things might improve as well, just because the industry is expanding?
That could be our tipping point.
Okay.
That we're so critically short of talent and skills that we're going to stop our old way of saying this is the path into this industry, and this is the career path within the industry. And there is a lot of work that's doing on, career switching, cross training. And I'm mindful of, before there was cybersecurity as a discipline, I had to build cybersecurity organizations. And so that came by retraining and cross training and bringing people who had the interest and the attitude, who were willing to do what it took to become proficient in something new. And I think if we have those people, that's our raw material. We can, IT's not magic. If a Barbie doll ball gown designer can learn how to code and become very good at IT and technology, then there's hope for everyone.
Oh, that's great. I mean, it's been really enjoyable to chat to you, and you've given us some great food for thought there. So Karen, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I appreciate it as well. Thanks for having me.